For most, death is final. But what about those who come back? On this episode of Surviving Death, Hunter Cairns was struck in the heart by an 80-mile-an-hour fastball and died instantly. Patrick Mitten was shocked by 6,800 volts of electricity. Zach Dunlap's skull was crushed by an ATV. What happens when we die? Our bodies begin a process of decay, and our brains shut down. But what happens when they don't? We now know that death is reversible. These are the true stories of those who have crossed over into the realm of the unknown, surviving death.
In the old days, there was a very clear line between life and death. When your heart stopped, you were dead. That was the end of it. But nowadays, there is no line between life and death. Death is reversible, even in extreme cases of trauma, where you'd expect a person to have no chance of survival.
On a Sunday afternoon in Los Alamitos, California, 15-year-old Hunter Cairns plays in a high school baseball game. By the bottom of the ninth, Hunter will be dead.
I've been playing baseball since I was about 4 years old. I like the thrill of playing baseball. Smelling fresh cut grass, making a good play and having the crowd cheer you on. It's a good feeling that you get.
Baseball has been a big part of our family, and I have taught and coached Hunter all the way through.
I have been to every game that he had played.
It was just another day in the life of the Cairns family. We were out there, all of us, like we always are.
Sometimes having my family at the game is a lot more pressure.
The score, I believe, was 2-1. We were up by 1 run.
With Hunter on deck, the opposing team brings in its strongest relief pitcher.
The pitcher was a very big kid.
He was 6'2", about 220. And we had a runner on first base.
The coach had him bunt.
The signal to sacrifice bunt would be the call that ends Hunter's life.
And he fired it in there. The ball came right at him. It might be pushing 80 miles an hour.
It was a wild pitch and it hit me in the side. I was hit about right here.
He tried to turn away from it, and it caught him right over the heart. The sound was like a loud pop.
That thud.
Maybe cracked a rib. It sounded so loud.
As soon as that baseball hit Hunter's chest, Hunter died. We've all heard stories about the decapitated chickens who are able to walk a few steps, and this is similar to that.
Hunter's heart stops instantly, but his brain tells his muscles to move forward. The last push of blood from his heart carries him a few final steps.
Every step just got slower and slower. And then he just went down.
As Hunter is playing, his heart is generating electricity. There's a rhythm that's going on. Suddenly, he gets hit by this very powerful force, and it just stops.
At that moment, I was thinking, you know, get up, you're fine. Shake it off. Nothing.
Can you hear me?
Immediately, I knew something was wrong.
The impact of the baseball hitting Hunter's chest causes a phenomena known as commotio cordis. His sternum caves in and sends a shockwave across his heart. The timing of the force hits between electrical discharges of the muscle, causing an electrical storm to overwhelm the heart and stop it cold. Within seconds, Hunter's arrested heart begins to fibrillate and seize uncontrollably.
Commotio cordis requires a perfect storm of timing and opportunity. The baseball struck Hunter's chest during a 20-millisecond interval of the cardiac cycle.
The timing of the ball hitting his chest coincided with a particular timing of his heartbeat and made it stop.
He's not breathing. He's unresponsive, eyes wide open. That was when I screamed for help.
I heard him scream my name, so I knew we had a problem. So I jumped up.
Hunter's grandfather, Jack Lee, is a former Los Alamitos fireman, certified in first aid and CPR.
As soon as I saw his face, I knew he was gone. My exact thoughts were, my God, he's dead. I just took his jersey and lifted it up so I could see what was going on, if there was any deformity, and I looked, and he had this big red mark. You could see the stitches of the baseball on his chest.
More than half the documented cases of commotio cordis occur in children under 18 due to the underdevelopment of the chest plate.
I got down and checked his carotid pulse on his neck. Was checking for a radial pulse in Hunter's wrist. There were no pulses. His eyes looked like they were about half open. He definitely wasn't breathing. Gus said, we got to start CPR right now. You checked the airway first. There was quite a bit of blood in the back of his throat, and that was a real concern.
The blood in his throat was actually coming from his lungs, because when we have cardiac arrest, the blood that normally flows from the lungs to the heart is backed up, has nowhere to go, and it then congests and comes back up into the mouth.
Hunter's grandfather keeps administering CPR, but commotio cordis has only a 3% survival rate.
I never thought I'd be giving chest compressions to my grandson. Over the course of a career, you know, I've been involved in hundreds of incidents where you try to bring people back, and you know in your mind it's not going to happen.
Chest compressions squeeze Hunter's heart between his ribs and his spine, pushing the remaining oxygenated blood to his brain.
The team photographer had called 911, and they were there very, very quickly.
Next thing I knew, somebody was trying to muscle in on me, and I realized it was a firefighter.
It's been over 10 minutes since Hunter's last breath. His brain is starved of new oxygen.
We stopped CPR so they can set up the defibrillator.
Hunter's heart goes from being stopped into ventricular fibrillation. His heart is twitching so rapidly that it is incapable of maintaining any blood pressure.
You have to wait 1 minute of CPR before you can shock a person, because you have to have the blood going through the body. Well, they didn't have to wait that minute because we were already doing it. So when they got ready and he said clear, and I looked and I said clear, and he hit Hunter. And his body just went stiff as a board and bounced off the ground. Clear. It's gonna work now, or it's over.
15-year-old Hunter Cairns is struck by an 80-mile-an-hour fastball. It stops his heart and kills him instantly.
was like eternity when he said, "He has a rhythm."
Defibrillation sent electrical signals to Hunter's ventricles, rebooting his heart and allowing restoration of normal rhythm.
Because Hunter's natural electrical rhythm has been thrown off, his heart could fail at any moment.
There is a risk that Hunter's heart, after it's been defibrillated and gone back to a normal beat, can go back into a state of ventricular fibrillation and go into that frenzied beating that doesn't lead to any blood being pumped out. And this happens actually quite commonly.
After being dead for over 15 minutes, Hunter takes his first breaths, but he's still in critical condition.
How long can we go without oxygen? And the answer is that simply there isn't a set time for every person. It really varies. When you stop blood flow into the brain, within 2 minutes, any oxygen that's left over will be quickly used up. And after that, the walls that protect the cells start to cave in, and they start to get holes in them, and then they eventually just fall apart and die.
Paramedics rush Hunter off the field.
With cardiac arrest resuscitation, we are gratified initially when we have a normal pulse and a normal heart rhythm, but we know that there still may be tragedy lurking because Hunter's brain may be irreversibly damaged.
You can't really breathe a sigh of relief because you know it's so far from over. You don't even know if the person's going to make it.
The ride to the hospital seemed like it took forever, and it was literally a mile away. There was a lot of commotion, several doctors, several nurses attending to him.
He had come conscious, but he was not coherent. He was struggling, trying to get off the gurney, and they had to hold him down. We're all on pins and needles, you know, waiting. It's the unknown. You don't know how he's gonna turn out.
Doctors race to stabilize Hunter.
He had tubes coming out of everywhere. He was moaning, making the worst sound that I've ever heard. I hope I never, ever hear again.
Hunter is moved from the ER to intensive care, where neurologists can monitor his brain activity. It's likely that he suffered brain damage.
I sat next to Hunter for hours and hours, waiting for him to come around and just so worried what he was gonna be like when he woke up, if he was gonna know who I was, if he was gonna know who he was, if he was ever gonna be Hunter again. The nurses came in, the doctor came in, and my husband and I were right there next to him, and he opened his eyes. He said, "Do you know who I am?"
And he said, "Mom," so everybody knew that he was gonna be okay.
The fact that Hunter could recognize his family immediately is a wonderful sign.
We don't know what leads a person to come back to life again after they've died. But in Hunter's case, it could have been that his heart was simply stunned, or that he has some kind of genetic or physical predisposition that allowed him to go through the shock of death better than others.
I have no recollection of the day at all. I don't even remember playing in the game. I don't even remember being in the hospital at all for like the 3 days afterwards. And I hardly even remember waking up like 2 days after I was already home.
Hunter's case is very interesting because it illustrates one of the key features that we see in events where people have had some kind of injury to the brain. The first thing that happens, of course, is that memory is not laid down anymore. And depending on the extent of the injury to the brain, they will lose memory for events for minutes, hours, maybe even days and weeks afterwards. And in fact, you also lose some of the memory just before the event had occurred.
I have seen the pictures of me in the hospital, laying in the bed.